Good day to everyone. This is Kenneth Frias, and our lesson for today is about chemical equation. This slide, what is this showing? It's showing you the splitting of the hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen molecules, as you can see on this illustration here. Then the next slide, this shows you the sodium metal when mixed with water. It violence reactively with water. As you can see here on the how it affects the sodium metal. And then this one is sulfuric acid that is mixed with table sugar. And as you can see, it is protruding out like appears like a black column. It's carbon. So it's transformed into water and carbon. What do these events show? Now, these events show what we call chemical reactions. The first slide here can show that the hydrogen peroxide transforms into new substances, the water and oxygen molecules. And then for this one, the sodium reacts with H2O, which produces sodium hydroxide, and then it releases hydrogen gas. And in this one, the sulfuric acid, when mixed with table sugar, it's transformed into carbon, which is this black stuff, and then also water molecules. Now, the question is, what is a chemical reaction? A chemical reaction is a process showing the formation of a new substance. And if you remember, when you talk about formation of a new substance, it's called chemical change. So this means that a chemical reaction shows you the chemical change that is happening. Now, a chemical reaction can be represented in a form of what we call chemical equation. What is a chemical equation? A chemical equation, it is a written form of a chemical reaction which shows you the chemical change. And this is a form in which it uses chemical formulas, symbols, and numbers. Now you can represent chemical reactions in different ways. Like in this one, you can use figures or pictures like this. So this is hydrochloric acid combined with the sodium hydroxide here. And then when you combine them, they form what we call water and salt. So it could be represented as like this one, or it could be in a sentence form. So we can say that in a chemical reaction, hydrochloric acid reacts with sodium hydroxide. So this is the hydrochloric acid. It reacts with sodium hydroxide to form what we call, so form, this is the symbol of form, water and salt. And in this last one, this is what we call the chemical equation. So it, as you can see, it uses what we call symbols and then chemical formulas and numbers. Okay. Now we should be familiar with the symbols used in chemical equations. Now for the first symbol, the plus sign, so this is used to separate substances. So it could separate reactants or products. Now for the arrow sign or the arrow symbol, it's also known as yield. So this is the one that separates the reactants and the products. Now this yield or arrow sign also points you to the product. So this one, and the usual pattern is the reactants is on the left and then the products are on the right. Okay, so the reactants are on the left and the products are on the right. Now sometimes you can also see arrows that are like this. So they are reversible. So that means the reaction could go either way. Okay. Or there are also times that you can see symbols like this. There's the letters enclosed by parentheses. So it tells you what is the state or the phase of matter of that substance. If it's solid, it's S, liquid is L, G is gas, or AQ if that substance is dissolved in water. Okay, and these symbols are usually placed after the chemical formula. Like in this example, we can say that let's say this hydrochloric acid is dissolved in water. You can say it is aqueous. You can put AQ close by parentheses after the chemical formula. And this sodium hydroxide, you can say it's solid. Okay. And then this arrow points you to the products. Now, H2O here, you can see the H2 is in liquid state, so it's L. And then the salt is in solid state. So that's how you use the letters, just to give additional detail regarding the state of matter of the substance, whether it's in the reactant or on the product side. Now, there are also other symbols that are used. For example, when you apply heat to initiate the chemical reaction, okay, like this one, it's a triangle symbol, it's delta sign, or you can just put the word heat just above the arrow, okay? Sometimes when they use catalyst, okay, this one, it's platinum, so you just put the symbol of the element there, or whatever catalyst you use, okay? When you say catalyst, it's the one that speeds up chemical reaction. Now, a chemical equation follows this basic form. As we have mentioned, on the left side is the reactant or the reactants, and on the right side is the product or the products. And they're separated by this arrow symbol, the yield symbol, also known as the reaction mechanism symbol. Now, chemical equation, remember, is based on the law of mass conservation. So this generally states that whatever is the amount of the reactant here should also be equal to the amount of product. That's the reason why a chemical equation is also similar to a mathematical equation. So you can say that this arrow sign is like the equal sign. So whatever is whatever amount is in the reactant, it should always be equal to the amount of the product. So that is the law that is being observed in chemical equation, the law of mass conservation. This is another example of a chemical equation. As you can see, there are parts here. So on the left side are the reactants, which are the hydrogen gas and the oxygen gas. And then there's the product, which is the water or H2O. And you can see a number is being used here. Okay, so it's called the coefficients. It's similar to mathematical equation. The coefficient is the one that describes the quantity of that substance. Okay, and then this arrow is the yield sign, also known as the reaction mechanism. There's a different lesson here. It involves what is really happening in between the chemical reaction. Okay, and this one is also the coefficient. Now, please take note, if the coefficient is 1, there's no need to put a number. So in this example, the coefficient of O2 here is 1. It's just that it's not written like in mathematics. It's understood that if there is no coefficient, the coefficient is already 1. Now, it would be very helpful for you to be also familiar with these diatomic elements, because when you're going to convert chemical reactions in a sentence format into a chemical equation, you need to be familiar with these diatomic elements, because you're going to write them in in this manner, because they always exist, or naturally they exist in pairs, unless otherwise there's a special description regarding that element. So if in a statement they mention bromine, you have to write it like Br2, something like this. So it should be, because it's diatomic, it naturally occurs in pairs, so it should be Br2 with the subscript of 2. Same with iodine, nitrogen, chlorine, hydrogen, oxygen, and fluorine. So Brinkelhoff. So it's very helpful for you to be familiar with this. So it will not be hard for you to convert a chemical reaction in a sentence format or a word format into a chemical equation. Now, let us try to write the chemical equations of the following statements, okay? Based on the format of reactant to product, and then there's the yield sign, okay, or other symbols needed. First, let's say aluminum bromide reacts with chlorine to produce aluminum chloride and bromine. So if you're going to analyze this statement, you can say that the reactants are the aluminum bromide and chlorine, because it says here aluminum bromide reacts with, so they are the reactants. Okay, to produce, so when you see the word to produce, it indicates the arrow sign, and then these are the products because it says to produce aluminum chloride and bromine. So you should be familiar, aside from knowing the diatomic elements, you should also be knowledgeable in how to convert the chemical names into chemical formula. And we know that aluminum bromide, aluminum is metal and bromine is non-metal. So you should know the oxidation state, okay? So we know that the oxidation state of aluminum is 3 plus because it has 3 valence electrons, okay? So it's 3 plus, it has 3 valence electrons. And you know that bromine has 7 valence electrons. Therefore, it just needs 1 more electron to be stable. So that means it has an oxidation state of -1. So in order for them, both of them to be stable, you need 3 atoms of bromine here, okay? So that each valence electron of the aluminum will go to the bromine, and then they will form what we call the molecule or the compound, okay? Aluminum bromide. And then you know that chlorine here is diatomic element. So you write here as Cl2. Okay, so something like that. So the chemical equation for this statement is this. So aluminum bromide, AlBr3, okay? Then there's the plus sign here. I'll just clear this. Okay, yeah. So there. Let's make this visible. Okay, so as you can see, this is the chemical equation of this statement. Aluminum bromide, AlBr3. So there are, the coefficient is 2, okay, just to maintain the law of mass conservation. So there are 2 molecules of aluminum bromide that will react. So react with, that's the plus sign, with 3 chlorine molecules and produce aluminum chloride, okay, 2 AlCl3, and so this is the end, and then 3 bromine molecules. So that's how we're going to convert this statement into a chemical equation. Now for this next statement, iron reacts with sulfuric acid to form iron 2 sulfate and hydrogen gas. Now, if you're going to convert this into a chemical equation, it should be like this. So we know that iron is not a diatomic, so it remains as it is, Fe, with no subscript. That means it's just 1, okay? Then sulfuric acid is H2SO4. So it says here, iron reacts with, so this is the plus sign, reacts with, okay? To form, this is the yield. Actually, it's similar to the equal sign, okay? Remember, it's similar to a mathematical equation. And then on the right side of the equation, the products. So to form what? Iron 2 sulfate. Okay, so if you're going to base it on the oxidation state of iron here, it's 2 plus or positive 2. It will form this compound or molecule, iron sulfate. And hydrogen gas. And we know that hydrogen is diatomic element, so that's why we put the subscript of 2 here. So that's how you convert this statement into a chemical equation. For the next sentence, carbon combines with oxygen gas to form carbon dioxide. If you're going to convert this into a chemical equation, it should look like this. So carbon is not a diatomic element, so it remains as it is. Carbon with no subscript. Then combines with, that's the plus sign, And oxygen gas is a diatomic element, so it has O2. Then to form is the arrow sign, or we can say the equal sign, carbon dioxide. There. So if you observe, it follows the law of mass conservation. That means the reactant, the amount of reactant is also equal to the amount of product. So as you notice here, there is one atom of carbon and two atoms of oxygen. So a total of 3 atoms here. And then as you notice on the product, it's 1 carbon dioxide, still a total of 3 atoms. So they follow what we call the law of mass conservation. For the next statement, so this is ultraviolet radiation splits ozone into oxygen and free oxygen. Take note of this. The one is oxygen, the other is free oxygen. This is a process called photodissociation. And you're studying this in when you study the atmosphere, in the stratosphere, that's what we call there's the ozone layer. This is what's happening in the ozone layer. There's an interaction between the ultraviolet radiation from the sun with the ozone molecules. And what happens is that these photons, or in the form of ultraviolet radiation, splits the ozone into oxygen and free oxygen. So what's the chemical formula of ozone? We know that ozone is O3, so it should be like this. So the chemical equation should be O3, okay? So ultraviolet radiation splits the ozone and into what? So into means it's going to go to the product into 2 substances. One is oxygen, since it's a diatomic molecule, it's O2. And take note, this is free oxygen. So when you say free oxygen, in some, they call it atomic oxygen. It's the one that is temporarily split from its partner. So it becomes a single atom. So it's O, single O. And since there is a note here, ultraviolet radiation is the one that splits the ozone. You can put UV, or you can say photon on the top of the arrow, just to indicate that the splitting of this ozone through photodissociation is through the action of the ultraviolet radiation or the photon. So some you can see right here, photon. Sometimes you can see there's a wave here, something like that. So it's an additional information. Then for the next, so this is a combustion, okay? Something is burning here. So with sufficient heat, okay, methane reacts with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. If you're going to analyze this sentence, you can visualize that it's burning. Okay, there's a burning scenario here. So with sufficient heat, if you remember the fire triangle, there should be heat, there should be oxygen. So this is the oxygen, and there should be fuel. Then that's the methane. So how are we going to convert this into chemical equation? So it's like this. So with sufficient heat, so that means the heat is the one that will also help in the chemical reaction, since heat could be in a symbol of delta. Okay, so you could put triangle here. So with sufficient heat, methane, so this is the methane, reacts with, so that is the plus sign, oxygen. And since oxygen is a diatomic element, it's O2. And then forms. So it forms carbon dioxide and, okay, so remember the plus sign is used to combine, okay, substances. So forms carbon dioxide and water. And if you notice here, there are 2 reactants, methane and oxygen. They are separated with the word reacts with. In here, they are separated with the plus sign. For the product, there are 2 products, carbon dioxide and water. So the end is the one that separates carbon dioxide and water in the statement. In this chemical equation, they are separated by this plus sign. And since it follows law of mass conservation, there's a balance reaction here. There's the right coefficient that is put in place. Okay, so that means 1 molecule of CH4 or methane plus 2 molecules of oxygen. So this is the coefficient, will yield or will form 1 molecule of carbon dioxide plus 2 molecules of water. For the next example, if you're studying biology, this is called cellular respiration. You know that it happens inside the cell, in the cytosol, and then some are in the mitochondria. So in the process of cellular respiration, the glucose and oxygen are utilized, okay? Thus releasing carbon dioxide and water as waste materials. If you're going to look at the sentence, there are two reactants. So in the process of cellular respiration, the substances that will begin the reaction are the following: the glucose and then the oxygen. Okay. And then you notice there are also two products. It releases the following: carbon dioxide and water. But remember, this is just a generalized statement, because actually in cellular respiration is a very complex process, okay, that involves glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and then there's the link reaction in the electron transport chain. So there's also actually lots of substances involved, but this is the general substances that are utilized in cellular respiration. So this will be the equation. So glucose, this is the chemical formula of glucose, C6H12O6. So plus, that's the end, okay? And glucose and oxygen. So there's a need for 6 molecules of oxygen, and oxygen is a diatomic molecule, so there's a 2 here, okay? They are utilized, so that means they're the ones used, so they're the reactants. Then the word releasing, that will give you the idea that it's already the arrow sign. What are being released? Carbon dioxide, so 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, and that's the plus sign, water, so H2O. And in order to balance, okay, the amount of reactant with the product, there should be 6 molecules of water in this chemical equation. Okay, so this is a type of chemical equation that is commonly used in biology, okay, and in biochemistry. Now for the reverse of that, okay, it's the process of photosynthesis, okay? If you remember photosynthesis, generally speaking, it's using light, okay, photo, okay, to create or combine materials. So what is that being made? Usually the food in the form of glucose. So in the process of photosynthesis, plants take in, so that will be the beginning of the reaction, take in the following: carbon dioxide, so these are the reactants, and water. Now the word to synthesize, okay, means to create or to combine. That will be the arrow sign, okay? The products are glucose and oxygen. So this will be the chemical equation. So in the process of photosynthesis, plants take in carbon dioxide, so that will be 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, and the plus sign, water, so 6 molecules of water, to synthesize, okay, glucose, and the plus sign, also release oxygen, 6 molecules of oxygen gas. And since this uses light, you can put light here, okay, just for additional information. Okay, that means it's photosynthesis. Now you notice cellular respiration and photosynthesis are reversible reactions. So you could put, you can also see equations like this. They have the reverse arrow, okay? The reverse arrow here, which indicates this is a reversible reaction. So that's basically the way on how you're going to convert sentence format in a chemical reaction into a chemical equation, which uses chemical formulas, this one, then symbols, the plus and the yield symbol or the reaction mechanism symbol, and as well as the numbers like the coefficients here. Okay, so that's the general procedure on how to convert sentence into a chemical equation. And remember, chemical equations, it's divided into the reactant side and the product side. And since it's similar to mathematical equation, this arrow sign could be likened to the equal sign. Now, as for the summary of this lesson, first we can say that a chemical equation It is a form of representation of a chemical reaction, which shows the chemical change by using the chemical formulas of the substances involved, then the necessary symbols, the plus and the arrow signs, okay, or other labels like catalyst, or let's say heat in the form of triangle symbol or delta sign, and numbers. That's the coefficient. Okay, remember, if the coefficient is 1, it's just like in mathematics, there's no need to put number 1, okay, before the substance. Just leave it as it is. It's already considered as 1. Then the substances in a chemical equation, okay, when you say substances, it could be in the form of an atom or a molecule, okay, or a compound. So the substances in a chemical equation are categorized into 2 groups: the reactants, which begin the reaction, and the products, which is the result of the reaction. And usually the arrow sign, it points to the product, okay? Now, chemical equation follows the law of mass conservation. So there is a requirement for any chemical equation to be balanced by putting the necessary coefficients. And we will discuss that in a different lesson called balancing chemical equation. So as to follow the law of mass conservation, which states that the amount of reactant or reactants is equal to the amount of products. Okay, so that will be all. I hope you understand this short lesson, and thank you very much.